Hi everyone. I'm Darren Yong. I'm from KPMG, leading telecom media and technology for Asia Pacific. Today we've got a interesting conversation around the topics of inclusive innovation and bridging the digital divide. So joining with me today is Sanjay Kaul. He's the Cisco president for Asia Pacific and Japan for service provider. So hi Sanjay, good to catch up and meet you today.
Great to meet you too. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. So look, I've been working in telco tech for a while, and I think all of us know how big tech has really transformed the world. We've seen major opportunities. These are the biggest growth companies around the world, primarily fostered around technology. And I guess as we reflect on why and how and the access to technology that developers have had and what they've been able to do with technology, these companies have absolutely come out of the blue, these unicorns. In other conversations I've been having, we've been looking at how potentially companies, smaller markets can leapfrog others because of perhaps technology. We know in India, one of the outsourcing capitals of the world, the ability to look at how they transform and leapfrog potentially using technology with software and AI, all these new emerging technologies are certainly coming up there as opportunities for them. So I guess I'd like to talk to you today about sort of this digital divide and what you see as technology perhaps impacting parts of rural countries or rural areas around the world. I mean, just what are your thoughts on this, Sanjay, and what you've been seeing in your role and what you've been seeing across the region?
No, thank you for that question. Obviously, digital divide is not a myth. It's real, and you will see digital divide across stratas of the geographies. Whether you're in a highly developed country or on the lower side of the developing world, digital divide exists, and it's true. I was looking at a report earlier which Cisco published. We said there was only 29 out of 195 countries where you could have internet connection affordable. Thankfully, India is on the affordable side. And you saw only 50% women had access to internet, right? So that tells you, irrespective of whether the technologies are penetrated or not, the digital divide in true sense is real, right? Now, what can be done and how can we bridge it? Of course, lots happening. I represent an engineering company. We are evolving technologies that are going to really, drive down or execute on what we call Industry 4.0. And I think that's what is needed, bringing telecoms and internet access to every citizen on earth. Today, I think we are doing pretty well, if I take a global view at it, in the urban areas. But if you go deep into the rural, the challenge is prevalent and exists. So I think that's really the first, getting internet access to everyone, irrespective of where he is in the world, right? Then second is really creating and thriving an ecosystem, that can draw business out of this. It's not just making possible the internet connection, because you have to look at how will the ecosystem behind making that possible survive and thrive. And India is a very, very good example of that. While if you look at last 3 years journey in India, from 120th position in broadband, they now reached position number 1, but at a tariff which is unbelievable. It's the lowest in the world. And it doesn't create a sustainable business for those who are putting this infrastructure to making that access possible. So obviously, as we pivot, post-COVID, I believe digital is the force that will drive the companies, our industry and other vertical industry, because this is going to be the new norm, doing business using digital, and which means if you want to see one, the digital divide getting bridged, and then also an industry behind it sustaining and surviving. We need to do a lot of things. I will go into that in a while, but clearly adoption of technology. I think you mentioned in your introduction making industrial IoT real, bringing in automation, converging the networks, what we call in Cisco flattening and IP-fying the network, because when you do that, you take a lot of cost out of the networks. So the combination of all these will create a network architecture which is what I call efficient in terms of lowering the cost of production and making it a sustainable business case. So I think that is the connection. I think yes, there is a divide. Yes, we have an opportunity to bridge it. Industry 4.0 execution is what's going to fund the case, but at the same time, industry in total need to adopt the technologies which will make it very cost efficient, service agile, and so on and so forth.
Yes, and I mean, Sanjay, amazing work that you guys have done at Cisco to get everyone connected per se. And I think we all appreciate, 10 years ago or even more, when all the internet was searching websites. But now you're setting up stores, you're arranging people to have commerce through that, and just in that empowering, enabling everyone in the nation, be it those in the farms in the middle of nowhere to those in the offices, are really critical for developing and helping bridge that divide. So absolutely 110% support what you guys are doing to bridge that divide. I want to ask you about sort of how you're seeing rural communities see innovation and potential, because what we're talking about here is those that have access are there, but those perhaps that don't. I mean, what are you seeing in Cisco and your travels and your experience that people in rural communities can benefit from if they're connected, if that divide is closed? Any thoughts from you on that?
Look, I'll give you my company view of it, but let me start with my own experience. Many years ago, I had a chance to work in sub-Saharan Africa, and we went to a village in Kenya. I think it's a real story. So this actually motivated me to write a book on this topic. But so we went to this village, which was deep in Kenya, very deep. Probably, I'm telling you a 10-year-old story. Probably we were the first ones to go explore, can we put telecoms here? And, we created together with World Bank, we created a consortia because none of the service provider had a business case to go to that rural village. They lived on fish, they had cattle, that was the source of income. But to cut that story short, we put finally, after a lot of deliberations and getting some charity and CSR fund, to put the first base station there. I promise you that base station got filled in first week. People will climb on the trees to make the calls. Once you give them access to internet, they figure it out. I mean, those young kids, we left some laptops there in their, called panchayat, which is where that place is governed from. When we came back after 2 months, those kids were playing with the computer. They just figured it out with very little training. So the point is, if first thing is to make internet access possible. Once you do that, rest follows. So that's why I said it's a novel thought. It can only be sustainable if you make the business work behind it. A service provider with some charity fund could put that first base station. Unless it's a long-term return on this and the ecosystem behind it, it cannot be sustained. I think that's fundamentally the problem we have. Government comes with a lot of initiatives. They put that first Wi-Fi access point, and then you go there 6 months down the lane, it's not even maintained. It doesn't work.
Yeah, so it's fascinating because I've seen the technology infrastructure conversation evolve. And just to carry on from what you're saying is that then you imagine, kids or families being able to code and write code and be able to write applications and even launch solutions and products. I mean, if you think about what that really means in terms of a nation, government's influence to that, education to the kids. You know, my daughter, she's been doing coding, and I've started to realize that coding is a combination of the left brain, right brain thinking. It's not your
Yeah.
linear thinking, right? And being able to solve problems in different ways is a really, really good skill. Then I ask myself, well, what if everyone learned how to code? What problems could you solve? You know, that's education. That goes back to governments. I mean, what's your sort of? I mean, you're obviously very passionate around CSR and giving back. I mean, how have you seen governments around the world or in your areas, invest, or what's your sort of thought around that? I mean, ultimately, the governments need to be involved in bridging this divide as well. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Look, to be very honest, I think government, and I'm telling you based on my personal experience in 3 continents where I worked, so Africa, Asia, Europe. I worked a lot in Europe as well. So government's role is to create the right policy framework, right regulation. Do not expect government to go execute on putting the technology down to the rural suburban and the rural area. That's the role of the private sector, which is the service providers plus the entire ecosystem behind that. So while if government does the right regulation and the policy framework, rest follows. I can give you a few examples. One which I'm really passionate about and see it's making a difference is the government of Philippines, who came with a very, very attractive 5G frequency structure. It's pretty unique. And now telcos could conserve their money not to pay for the spectrum. They're putting that into infrastructure. And we are seeing that telcos there, I mean, PLDT Smart is one of our close customers. They're building a brand new 5G transport network, end to end.
Mm.
And they can afford it because they don't have to pay exuberant amount of money for spectrum. So now coming to India, where we are talking about, I think government really, if they want to use this industry 4.0 to leapfrog and beat the developed world, I mean, they have got all the ingredients. Now they need to create a policy and regulatory structure that really creates impetus for the service providers first and the ecosystem behind them to go execute on the opportunity.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's not one or the other, it's the combination of all have to come together in tandem to work on this. I think objective is bridging the digital divide, but how do you set up yourself for it and create a sustainable business for the ecosystem? That's the key.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, absolutely. And that whole 5G IoT explosion we all know is coming. And so ensuring that everyone is equipped, the government enables, the people know how to, and that educational or digital divide is there for us all is certainly really important. I mean, I think personally, I think in this space, there is a lot to come, absolutely. And I think the work that you've been doing, I think is amazing. I think obviously there's a lot of opportunities for all of us, including those in India, around this topic. And so I think, we could talk on forever around this, Sanjay, I'm sure, just hearing what you've got to share today. But we do have some time limits. But I really wanted to, first of all, say thank you for your sharing your insights, the work that Cisco's been doing. But I think if there was one thing that you'd want to sort of leave this audience today around bridging the digital divide, what are those couple of things that you'd like to leave this audience with before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I think, look, it starts with really, the government and the policymakers first creating the right framework, right policy framework, and the regulatory framework. That's step number one. Step number two is the service providers, which are the rock bed. They're the foundation for making this happen, execute on this mission of bridging the digital divide. I think they have a lot to do. They need to transform their networks. And when I say transform the networks, it's on 4 fronts. First, they need to look at current architectures, which are very, very complex because they build these networks in layers, 2G, 2.5G, 3G, 4G, now they're planning for 5G. So they need to flatten these networks so they can take cost out. If per gig cost of production today is 10 rupees, you need to bring that to 1 rupee. Because if you want to bridge the digital divide and make it affordable for every citizen in the country to use your service, you got to reduce the cost. The second one is they need to look at their data center architecture, because data centers were built like monolithic central data center. Every bit that got produced in these networks, it was brought back to the central repository. No. In Industry 4.0, it's all about instant gratification. You need to capture the data when it gets produced, so you can draw insights out of it. You can apply security, analytics, and extract value, right? So as a result, they need to bring capture data centers to the edge, right? Third one is is my favorite. I call it Uberization of OSS bases, which is you can't have those complex OSS bases environment. For every small change in the old environment, it takes 5 months to fix provisioning, billing, and so on. This era is about instant gratification. You need to be self-provision, self-bill, self-rectify, self-care, right? So that is the third. And the fourth one is security. Everything you do in this new architecture, security should be front and center, because it is not about having security firewalls in your network or in your data center. You are as good as the last terminal that's accessing the data. So you have to make sure security is ubiquitous, it's connected, it's end-to-end. So these are the four things that SPs need to do. And then the last, which is where I come in from, is technology providers need to bring in agile business models. We need to bring in software-oriented products, which are first not proprietary but open, so we can connect the app world, who are gonna at the end of the day create unique application for each industry. So I think this is, honestly, if we do these three things and each player has a role to play, I think we are really setting us up to bridge this digital divide. And what is very interesting is it was an internet report from Cisco that revealed in India, if you go execute on this digital mission, which Prime Minister Modi has laid out, by 2030, 25% of GDP can get impacted. It means 25% of GDP could come out of this digitization. So there's a phenomenal reward out there for the country, the service providers, and the ecosystem behind them.
Well, thank you, Sanjay, for your sharing. I think certainly for those listening today, inspired, and the vision of digital divide is not so much now a divide, it's more of a journey for us all. And also those who are listening today, keep on promoting that, helping everyone around the world be connected as possible, because we all know that if we do that, there's a lot for each country and the world to prosper from. So on behalf of myself from KPMG, Cisco, and India Mobile Congress, thanks for listening to this session, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions that you're listening to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.